GEIE, the tallest in Europe. Or instead, go out a bit further from the centre of the city, where traditional and picturesque, but also more modest districts can be found. In these parts of London, almost reminiscent of lush green countryside at times, in these villages arranged around long main roads, lined with house upon house, each identical to the next, from time to time the silhouette of big housing estates stand out, like here at Forest Hill. Social housing blocks on whose roofs one photographer, fascinated by his city and its transformations, likes to perch. For nearly 15 years, James Burns has been surveying London with a bird's eye view through his aptly named project, London From The Rooftops. A passion that was sparked at a very young age.
Growing up as a teenager in London, I was fascinated by the music of the city. The underground music of the city was being played illegally, broadcast from the rooftops of the city's council housing estates. This started an obsession for me. I started to wonder, well, if my music is coming from the tops of these buildings, I'd love to know what the view is from the tops of these buildings. It just started this obsession with getting up high, looking over the city. I think when you come up onto the rooftop, you really start to feel a connection with the city that is different to the connection you feel when you're on the streets. I just found myself at home on the rooftops. I hardly ever do any street photography. It's always up on the roof. When I started photography, in the early days, I wanted to capture the disappearing architecture of London. So a lot of the social housing buildings from the 1960s and the 1970s, they were beginning to be taken down. These were places where you had a good view from, and they were disappearing. So I felt like London was losing places to get a view. And now we wait for the colours. After the architecture fascination, then there came the weather fascination as well. The most difficult part of my job is guessing the weather. This is a characteristic of London. It has weather. London is famous for its weather. Maybe not famous in a good way. A lot of people will complain. They come to weather, it's too cold. It's the middle of summer and I'm wearing 3 layers. But for me, this is what makes it exciting. I like the fact it's unpredictable and it changes, keeps you on your toes. Over time, the project became more about the views themselves, and then the project became about getting on to as many rooftops as possible around the city. I guess there was a time when it was a bit cliche to create photographs of sunsets and sunrises, but for me this is the moment of the day in which the light changes so much and it creates such an emotion. If you're going to take photographs of the moon, it arrives in a very specific place, a very different place on the skyline every night. I got there with plenty of time to spare, set up, and I waited for this moon and I was like, where is it, where is it, where is it? It's supposed to be here already. And then all of a sudden, it emerged right from behind St. Paul's. It was one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. I started crying, that's the truth. I started crying, it was that beautiful. As a consequence of this obsession that I had with getting this shot and eventually getting it, it led to, well, it changed my life, actually. And the photograph ended up in the newspaper and take my career to a new level.
A photo which opened doors for James and allowed him to gain access to the exclusive rooftops of the centre of London, authentic observatories from which to witness its major transformations.
See, when I started taking photographs, actually, London wasn't changing much at all. But in the last 10 years, that's really changed. And over the next 10 years, that's going to completely change again. So I will never get bored, and this project just will not finish. So I go back to the places that I've always photographed from, and with the same passion, I'll take the same photographs. If you compare the skyline of London to probably every other major capital city in Europe, at the moment London's changing faster and it's got, in my opinion, the most exciting skyline at the moment.
In fact, 40-odd towers at least 100 metres high have sprung up in less than 20 years, and around 100 more are currently under construction. More than enough to feed James's artistic appetite.
Art is about making people feel something. Music is about making people feel something, right? For me, I want to make people feel something when they look at one of my photographs. I want them to say, that makes me feel in love with London. That makes me feel happy to be alive. That makes me want to get up early in the morning. And for me, that's art. After a particular terrorist attack in London Bridge, it was the third attack in a short space of time. The city was feeling low, that's the truth. Now, a few days later, I was looking at the weather forecast, and it looked to me like we were going to have a rainbow at the end of the day. So I made my arrangements, I went to my location. It was crazy, crazy wind. I mean, the rain was blowing in sideways to where I was. But when the rain passed, about half an hour before sunset, poof, this big, beautiful rainbow just went over the city. And this was 2 days after the attacks. And I got home and I put this photograph onto the internet, and I got an email from a newspaper editor who said, James, this rainbow has already been described as the rainbow of hope. You know, that gave me a lot of happiness, because I captured something which symbolised the hope which Londoners needed, but Londoners did have, you know, at that time.
But London's increasing affection for vertical architecture, whether it be offices or residential buildings,